Got Billy T to come on, so let's bring him on. Long-awaited debut on the channel. Great to have you on, Billy. The king of Twitter, I swear, your tweets absolutely bang every single time. I think
and TikTok
and TikTok. I don't think there's been an episode where we react to Twitter and your name hasn't come up. So good to have you on, mate.
Oh, mate, it's an absolute pleasure. And I always say Tottenham make it very easy for me to do that kind of thing. You essentially just have to point at them what they're doing. That's all you really need to do. But honestly, it's a real pleasure to be on with you guys. Absolutely, a massive fan of your work and absolute honour for me to be here.
I think every week you could do 5 reasons why Tottenham is a simulation. I think you do those quite often. Every week there's a new reason. I think.
Yeah, I mean, what I've started doing recently is I start on a Monday. I start a new notepad on my iPhone, and I just write down everything that ridiculous that Spurs have happened, and it's astounding how many things happen each week for our football club.
It's madness. It's absolute. We're basically just a beam. That's all we are.
It's and then to top it all off, we had the Arsenal Cup last week, which I don't think we'll ever top.
Only at bloody Tottenham these things happen. It's just madness, seriously. Look, obviously Spurs looking like they're going to get Conor Gallagher over the line. What's your kind of initial reaction to the transfer?
I agree with you guys. I think it's a smart signing. I do agree with what you were just saying. There is a panic signing in reaction to the Bentancur injury, and I also agree with what you said. And sometimes it's okay to be panicking. We're in a crisis. We should be panicking. So I understand that. I think we're desperate need of a midfield. We're desperate need of more bodies across in many areas. And again, completely agree with what you were saying. I would love to get a passer in there as well. Interested in the Curtis Jones links, look, because I did see a graphic on I think Spurs Statman, I think his Twitter name is, where Curtis Jones actually has among the best progressive passing stats in the league. But Gallagher is certainly not that kind of midfielder. But I think it's a good like-for-like for Bentancur, and that's about what it is, really. It probably comes in as our best midfielder, but I don't think it's going to be a needle mover in terms of the way we play, because I've still got massive concerns about our ball progression in the centre of the midfield.
Yeah, I agree with that. But in terms of a needle move, do you think it'll be a needle mover in terms of hurting any sort of protest this weekend? Because we know that there's planned protests. We know that it's off the back of the protests that we saw, quite successful protests last year, that I was a part of pretty much all of them. Now Levy's gone, we're moving into a so-called new era under Enic 2.0. Spurs always seem to do something before a protest to try and derail it. Do you think there's any sort of possibility of that?
I think some people have questioned that, but I think the fan base in general need a lot more than this to be convinced of any kind of ownership, particularly one that is attaining to be a new one, but realistically is the same people that have been here for 25 years. I think they're going to have to do a lot more than Conor Gallagher to convince fans' frustration at the moment. And I would also suggest, it goes a lot deeper than signings at the moment. The stuff that's going on off the pitch, Fabio Paratici is about to leave us. We have a manager that seems to, I don't think many people would think that he's a long-term solution for Tottenham. The players are fighting the fans. The fans are, the connectivity between the players is long gone at the moment. Our captain's coming out against the board. It's just a complete circus at the moment. So I think it'll take a lot more than this particular signing to convince us that this new era of the Lewis family 2.0 Enic is any different to the 25 years we've seen previously.
When you cast your mind back to the summer, and obviously we won the Europa League, Daniel Levy stood down. There were, as Ben said, at the back end of last season... stood down, I should say. As Ben mentioned, there were large protests at the back end of last season. For you, did you ever want these protests to stop? Was it a case of you wanted to give Enic 2.0 in quotation marks a grace period to see in the short term what was the plan and what they were kind of trying to implement, or was there kind of like a healthy dose of skepticism even with this Enic rebrand come the summer?
I think we fell somewhere in the middle of both of those camps. I think, because such a massive thing has happened that Daniel Levy had left, and there were a number of new people that have come in on an executive level, we almost have to give them a sort of a grace period. But I think that goodwill has been swallowed up almost immediately with how shambolic things have gone since they've taken over. And I think, you only have to look at the Tom Barkley article a couple of days ago, where he's talking about how, off the pitch it's an absolute shambles. I think the leadership at the club is lacking on almost every level at the moment. I think there's no clear direction. I think the fact that we're sort of languishing in 14th and out of both cups, and in obvious need of massive surgery to our squad, and we're halfway through January now almost, and we've only really made, it's only been the last couple of days we've made a signing. I think there's plenty of alarm bells there already. So while the initial intention was to say, okay, let's see what they do in January, let's see if they are going to be any different, I think the absolute chaos that surrounded us already and their immediate awakening has sort of validated those skepticism of whether this actually is Enic 2.0, or whether the reality is that it's just the same people trying to rebrand as a PR exercise, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think about the protests back last year. Obviously, it was heavily focused on Daniel Levy and the job that he was doing at the football club. Now he has gone. What is the messaging going into this protest?
So the messaging going to this protest is, at the beginning of the season, we were told that the Lewis family, or Enic 2.0, or whatever you want to call them, they will obviously always refer to themselves as the Lewis family, because I think they believe, after the bad will between fan base, that Enic has now got a lot of baggage between it, that sort of label. So they will always call themselves the Lewis family. So I'll do the same. The Lewis family, promised that. I think what you have to consider is that these guys rejected 3 quite high-profile bids, allegedly anyway, and we certainly know that's true because of the practices of having to declare interest and all that kind of thing. So they've already made it clear they don't want to sell the club. So if that's true, okay, so what is your intention to do with this football club? And they've made it clear on several occasions they want to put football first. They want to really try and have something at this, try and invest in the football club to make it a football first, trophy-winning side. And they promised that on several occasions. And when you look at interviews with Enic, look at interviews with Frank, they continuously say the Lewis family are being ambitious. Well, so far we've seen no signs of that. We've seen, we're in a bit of disarray. The director of football that they sort of chose to hang their hat on in September is already leaving after reports that he doesn't see eye to eye with everyone. He's
just got a bird, mate. He's just got a new bird.
Exactly. Exactly. The transfer window going into it, we don't seem that prepared. Or considering they had 5 months to prepare for it, it seems to me, Gallagher is a mark. I do think it's a positive sign, and don't get me wrong, but it's a market opportunity. I don't think in November and December, they were thinking Conor Gallagher is really the guy we've got to go and sign. I think it was more like Bentancur's got injured, so they've gone, okay, well, who can we go and sign? Let's go and sign Conor Gallagher to replace Bentancur. So I haven't seen any signs of this ambitious. So all we're asking for is for them to withhold those promises, to keep those promises, and show us that you are different to the new ownership. And, we need heavily investment into our playing squad if we're going to get anywhere near back to the way we were, even as long as 5 years ago.
So it's more of a case of, now we're sitting here 13th of January, obviously the protest coming on against the West Ham game on Saturday. Is it more of a case of putting pressure on the board to let them know that we're here, we're watching what you're doing, and we're going to scrutinise what you're doing, as a case of maybe... Look, I know the message wasn't sell up now or get out now, but it was very much, we don't really want you here anymore because you're not doing too much of a good job at this football club. Yeah,
and I think, throughout Change for Tottenham, all we want is to be competitive on the pitch again, and for a football club to be proud. And, I always, hark back to the Pochettino era, and I know, it's big in the news at the moment because of the Conor Gallagher thing. I know it'll always be a question at Tottenham's hearts. Daniel Levy and Enic were in charge then, and there were no protests then. There wasn't any bad will behind the fan base because we had a football team where we could see what we were trying to do. We were ambitious, and we were competing on the top level every season. And that's all we really want as football fans. And we want the Lewis family to either hold their promises and do that, or sell the football club if they're not going to.
And when you talk about Fabio looking like he's nearly confirmed, at the end of this transfer window, he's going to be leaving. There's apparently a disagreement with him and the other people in the hierarchy about the manager. Apparently he never wanted Frank in the first place, but now he's leaving, and Vinay and Lang are going to be the guys, I'm guessing, to kind of fulfill whatever his requirements were, unless we get a new sporting director. Out of those three, was Fabio not the one we should be trusting more, to be honest, of his opinion, rather than Vinay and Lang? And does that go into how kind of messy this hierarchy is at the moment? The fact that he's the one out the door rather than the other two, who I think at the moment the fans don't really trust.
And I think that kind of speaks to the sort of level of incompetence that we're already seeing under this, in inverted commas, new era. Because when they appointed the double football director, co-directors thing, they said that Fabio was the one who would be in charge of the first team. Fabio would be the one in charge of the first team players and the first team squad and overseeing that. And Lang would be in terms of youth development. But actually, it seems to have flipped the reverse, because if the person who's in charge of the first team and the person who's in charge of the players doesn't want the manager, then surely that has autonomy over someone who's in charge of the youth. So it's completely flipped on its head already. It smacks to me of something which they did because they had to do it. So I know there's rumours that Daniel Levy had already sort of offered him the job when his ban transpired, finished. And it just, again, it's just, a general area of incompetence that, the big appointment that they did make in the football side of things, that was their first major footballing appointment, Fabio Paratici, is gone already.
Yeah, it's just such a shit show. It's just such a lack of leadership at this football club. And you look at, let's focus on Johan Lang here for a second, because what has he ever done in his career to actually fall into a role like this at Tottenham Hotspur? Like, at Aston Villa, he got the job. They were just going down and down and down. And as soon as he left, actually, that's when they started to see a bit of light in the end of the tunnel and go the other way. And ever since getting the job at Spurs, Spurs have just been going down and down and down. So, I mean, what has Johan Lang actually done to actually stay in the job?
As well, that before he actually went from Villa, he got demoted at Villa as well. He actually got demoted to a lower job before he even left. So even before leaving, he was demoted. He was essentially been demoted at Tottenham too. I mean, this guy, I don't know about you guys, but I have no faith in this guy whatsoever. No. I think his biggest sort of, we finished fifth under Ange. We managed to scrape a fifth place, and we delivered a transfer window of Solanke teenagers. And after that, which I think was, ended up having the horror show in the league, which we saw in the season after. I know he's got a decent eye for young talent, but Tottenham are at a stage now where we need heavily investment in quality, experienced players. And I have absolutely no faith in Lang to do that whatsoever. I don't know about you guys.
No, I agree.
I completely agree. But what would you say to people who say, since Levy left, as you say, you wanted to maybe give a bit of a grace period, but you're not going to, when there's major restructural change. I think Ali Gold said 13 new heads of departments have been installed at Tottenham Hotspur since the summer, and there's been lots and lots of change from the top down in the summer. You're not going to see material change maybe in the short term, but it's going to be a long-term thing. So to think that there's going to be change within a few months is maybe a bit fanciful, and that's going to take time to see that filter down to the pitch essentially. Like, what would you say to fans who have who think that way?
I think that's fair enough. I think it is going to take a while. I think what's become really clear is that Daniel Levy was doing the job of about 4, 5, 6, 7 different people. He scaled from a football club that was worth tens of millions in the 90s to a $1 billion company. And there's no way that one man should have had that much responsibility. And what you've seen since he's gone, we've hired about 4 or 5 different executives. And of course, there's going to be a bedding in period for that to happen. But I don't think that really flies with fans for the moment, because we're in an actual crisis right now. We're declining rapidly on the pitch. As we mentioned before, off the pitch we're a shambles. Our captain, there's no leadership at any level. The manager is struggling. The captain of the football club is struggling. There's no direction. And we're languishing in 14th. And unfortunately for fan base, we're looking downwards rather than up, aren't we? I think we're much, the way that we're going at the moment on the pitch, we're much likely to finish below 14th and above, in our current trajectory. So I don't think we have any time to act on that thing. So I think what we need to do is react to the situation that we're in, and we need, serious investment in January, or just at least some promises that the club are aware of the absolute crisis that we're in.
But what does serious investment in January actually look like? Because I think we can all agree that we're not exactly an attractive proposition to big players right now, and who is actually going to come. And I'm like, if we take them on face value that they want to see more wins and more wins regularly, they want to invest heavily into the playing staff and blah blah blah, who can we actually attract in this January transfer window that's going to move the needle?
I think the Conor Gallagher deal is a good example of the reality in the world of football, that if you are prepared to pay the wages and you are prepared to pay the transfer fee, then players will come. Because I think right now, any player that's forced with the choice between Aston Villa and Tottenham, if you turn on the pitch, is going to choose Aston Villa because they're miles ahead of us in the league table.
Yeah.
They're miles ahead of us in terms of the playing style, the manager, much more settled, much less crisis. But what actually happened is Tottenham came in and said, actually, right, we're going to play, permanently. We're going to try and have a permanent transfer. We're going to offer you a 5.5-year deal. Aston Villa was sort of pressing around with loan to buy and things like that. Tottenham came in with the actual money and got the deal done. So I'm always a firm believer in the fact that if you actually pay the money for these players and you offer them high wages, then they will come. And I'm not saying we need to go and spend 300 million in January as much as everyone would love that. That's not realistic. But what we do need is badly need some bodies that can come in this amidst this injury crisis and improve our first team. If that's 2 or 3 signings in January and then move on to the summer where we can hopefully have a bit more investment. But I know I'm not expecting us to go out and sign 5 players in January or anything like that. But we do desperately need to react to this, another injury crisis and another, competency crisis in the Premier League.
Yeah, and you've got the players as well kind of calling out the board, not just the fans. Yeah. You had Romero obviously make that statement on Instagram after the Bournemouth game saying that other people should be talking. They only come out when things are going well to tell a few lies. And obviously a lot of the players as well were liking that post and commenting on that post. So it must be a widespread belief, I believe, in the dressing room about that. So what's your kind of feelings about what Romero did? Obviously, you're organising a protest against sport, so you obviously agree with him. But should our captain be saying that? Do you think it's a right thing for a player at the moment who's currently the captain of the team to be calling out the board after, emotionally after a loss, or do you think those things should be kept inside the dressing room?
Firstly, I agree with absolutely everything Romero said. I think, it's interesting that we, at the beginning of summer when everything was rosy, and we were European champions. It seems to be long forgotten at the moment. Mm-hmm. We had endless videos from BILLIE and lots of communication. And now that we're in crisis, we haven't seen anything since then. So I do agree with that. I think the issues that he's talking about is generally an English football problem rather than it's a problem within the media of English football rather than a Tottenham problem. There's no clubs where you hear, interviews after every game from the director of football, like you might hear in Germany or something like that. In England, it just doesn't really happen. The manager brunts all of it. It's just the way that English football generally works. And I do agree that it should generally be the people above that you should hear more from, particularly when we're in a crisis like that. However, I don't think it's a good message or a good look for the club, good optics for the club, that the club captain is coming out and saying these things, particularly after a defeat. And I think Romero himself has probably, has been a bit erratic this season. I've always defended Romero, particularly in the last 2 seasons, that he has this reputation of being a hothead or getting red cards. But he's actually kind of sunk into that this season, and he has been rash, and he has been his competency on the pitch has dropped as well, and I think he's let us down this season, both on the pitch and off the pitch. So I don't think it's a good look for your club captain to do it. I can't imagine someone like Son, for example, coming out with a statement like that. It just wouldn't happen. And I actually kind of think that all this sort of the connectivity between the fans and the players has been completely lost this season. I think in part, Son was really good at keeping up with that connectivity because he had such a great relationship between the fans. I think that's particularly broken at the moment. So I don't think it's a good time for the captain to be coming out and making the club look bad in the light of everything. While I agree with him and everything that he said, I think the timing of it is wrong and the way that he did it is wrong as well. Particularly the fact that I think the leadership at every level at Tottenham is struggling at the moment. I don't think Thomas Frank has a handle on the players, which is why you're seeing Romero sort of do what he wants in games, and Mickey van der Ven and people like that, Spence and all these kind of things. And at the same time, I don't think Romero is being a good leader for our team as well, which is why there is a completely broke down relationship at the moment between the fans and the players.
When it comes to the manager, his role in what's happening right now, it's a bit of the club, in terms of what the fans are calling for, they're a bit between a rock and a hard place, because if they sack him, they're obviously admitting they've made an absolute pig's ear of the appointment, and that they're maybe incompetent for hiring him in the first place, and they're ruining another project. But if they keep him, they're keeping in a guy who a lot of the fans are not happy with the football he's producing. And so what kind of direction should they be going in? Should they just back him fully and say, look, you're our guy, this is gonna be a long-term thing, even though right now it's failing, we really believe in you and we want to continue this project? Or should they admit defeat and say, we got this one wrong and we're going to go in another direction, but then It's a start of yet another project. It's another transition season. It's yet again something that Tottenham fans are complaining about hiring and firing managers consistently.
I think, I think the problem runs much bigger than Thomas Frank, and I think Tottenham needs to do a little bit of soul searching at the moment and think, what kind of football club do we want to be? Because I think at the current time, we've completely lost our identity as a football club. We seem to just hop from random manager to random manager, because if you look at the succession since Pochettino, we've had Mourinho, we've had Nuno, we've had Conte, we've had Ange, we've had Mason as an interim as well in there, and then Frank. There's nothing really which links any of those managers. We're almost just hopping randomly. I mean, you could not get two polar opposite managers in Ange and Frank if you tried. They're literally completely the opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of everything they do. So there's no coherent identity at Tottenham. So I think before we even worry about Thomas Frank, I think the people above that, and at the moment we don't really even have a director of football, which I think is a massive worry. They need to decide, what is our identity going to be? And I personally would suggest that Thomas Frank does not fit that identity, because I would hope that our identity is to be an attacking football team, front-footed, possession football team, possession-based, as we've seen in the past. Managers like Harry Redknapp and Pochettino. And I always see your video doing the rounds of the Harry Redknapp one, where he's choosing his team over the team that we have now. And I mean, that rings true. We all want to go back to that kind of style of football, don't we? And we all want to go back to that kind of quality in the team. And then I think the football team need to think, right, rather than keep just going from random managers, we need to set a stall out for being an attacking football team. And I think Thomas Frank will be a casualty of that, either now or in summer, because he doesn't play that kind of football. I think we were lying to ourselves if we thought, he might have played like that for a season at the Championship in Brentford. But this guy is cautious to the max. I think we've seen that in everything that he's done this season. And then we sort of stopped trying to think, well, let's go from manager to manager to manager, to think, right, well, let's go from the top up with the director of football and buy players which are going to suit that regardless. A bit like the sort of way that Brighton and Brentford do. And have you seen this season? Brentford have shown that it doesn't really matter who their manager is, because they're so well run and well organised. They can get rid of the manager and hire the set piece coach, and they'll improve, because they are really clear of their identity. So I think Tottenham need to be really much clearer on what their identity is, rather than just going from random manager to random manager.
On the protests, so is there going to be like a succession of protests throughout the season? Is that plan in place, or is it just the kind of one-off protest for now and to see how they react to it? Where's it kind of at in terms of the planning?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So obviously, we are sort of aware that this is a new, in inverted commas, new period. And we are just going to be kind of reactive to how they do in the January transfer window. We're already making plans for the games that are in February as well, depending on how the January transfer window goes, because we just want to see our club be an ambitious football club. And if we do see that in January, or if we do see some smart football decisions, I think the key thing which we've been lacking lately in terms of football, it's not like ambitious is probably a bit of a difficult word to use. So I'd say like smart footballing decisions, because we've spent money over the last few years. It's just been spent really, really badly. So as long as we can see that the new owners are at least trying to invest in the playing squad, or at least trying to do the right things, I'd love there to be no more protests, because that means we're all happy and things like that. But certainly do have an eye on the February games as well, for continued action, continued consistent action, because I think that's the only way that you can really go about change. And as I mentioned before, we were already at the beginning of this new era trying to give them a bit of a grace period to see what's happened, but we've just been absolutely inundated with frustrated fans that are saying, when are the protests starting up again? Because I think the fan base are at an all-time low at the moment, and I think that's being reflected with the stadium attendances diminishing every single game. The Man City game is on general sale, which is unheard of for a game of that size. And I think fans, for the first time that I can remember in the last 10, 15 years ago, are now starting to vote with their feet. And I think really that's stronger than any protest that we can do, is that if fans are not turning up to the stadium anymore, then that's really the ultimate form of protest.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I've never known it in my history of supporting Spurs for it to be so easy to get a ticket for any game.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
Even away games.
And you have to go on Twitter and people are trying to sell, Man City tickets for £20, £15 or whatever, just to try and get rid of them. Like, it's great, and people hand them out for free. It's nuts.
I know.
I just think that speaks to the general apathy.
Anyone can go on these Facebook groups and pick up a ticket for free on the day or the day before the game to any home game, which is just nuts. And even games like Bournemouth away, usually like a golden ticket where nobody can get a ticket because the allocation's so small. I know it still went to very high points, but I've just seen tickets flying left, right, and centre for games like even like Bournemouth away, which is just a massive shock, isn't it?
And it's a real shame that this comes after, being European champions and being in the Champions League. It feels like all of that sort of goodwill that we had at the parade sort of immediately been wasted and ruined because, like I said, I've never known a point where the fan base have this much apathy towards the club, and the kind of anger almost has sort of dissipated from the fan base because a lot of people have just given up now. And I think that's because these owners, Enic and the Lewis family, have been here for 25 years, and I think while people might have at the beginning thought, right, maybe this will be something new, I think already pretty quickly that kind of optimism has disappeared.
Yeah, and it's like even in the Aston Villa game, because everyone was saying with the Champions League games, the ticket prices are too expensive. You lower the ticket prices and you'll see the stadium get packed out. But that wasn't the case for Aston Villa. They were £30. £30 across the whole stadium, and it was still so many empty seats.
And there were 9,000 Villa fans there as well, so it was really low attendance for an FA Cup on a Saturday against Aston Villa. £30, they can't get anywhere near filling it. It's crazy.
Technically our biggest game of the season to this point as well, because we knew that what a massive only chance of silverware left is this FA Cup, isn't it? So we knew that we needed to get through, and as you say, the attendance is shocking. And I look back to those videos at the moment of the parade, and it's like an alternate universe. It's like a different timeline. It's like I look back at that thinking, wow, things have just spiraled so quickly. But when it comes to Enic and all this kind of stuff, I think it's right that the pressure should be put on them, because for me, yes, they've rebranded, but if you take that away, you take away their PR push in the summer, it's still a continuation of exactly what they've been implementing for the last 25 years. So for me, it's only right to basically ignore that rebrand and basically act as if nothing has changed, because until they prove something has changed, there's no point in us giving them that time to change, because they need to prove it to us. It's not about us giving them the benefit and the doubt until they prove otherwise. They need to prove it to us that they've changed before we start to give them any goodwill. And I think that's absolutely right, in my opinion.
Yeah, but also on top of that, right, we had this January transfer that was supposed to be their first kind of evidence to show Spurs fans what they can do, right? And on whatever you want to say about or think about Brennan Johnson and whether you think he's good enough or not, he was a body that could put the ball in the back of the net. He sold Brennan Johnson on the 1st of January. We're still sitting here 2 weeks later with no attacking option brought into the football club. Kudus has got injured now. We have no fit right winger in the squad. And it's just like, where's the ambition on that sense? If you're going to sell Brennan Johnson, at least have a replacement lined up to come in the very next day. Like, it's just the same kind of mistakes over and over again.
And in the Premier League game before January, Takai and Johnson were both on the bench. Obviously, they got sold or loaned pretty immediately in January. So the squad literally got weaker. And as a result of that, we dropped points in every Premier League game in January so far, and we've gone out the FA Cup. Because obviously you can debate whether I know a lot of people sort of think that Johnson sale is a good thing long term, but the literal fact is our Premier League squad is weaker because we've lost 2 of the bench and haven't replaced them. And we've dropped points in every game in January, and we're out the FA Cup. And a lot of people would now point to the season being over. So I think immediately, very, very quickly, they've sort of shown that this huge opportunity that they had in January to show, this is something new. They've pretty much already, halfway through, and we haven't seen any evidence of it whatsoever.
Yeah, it's so true. But in terms of Saturday, I think for anyone interested, and I hope you are, and I hope the turnout is very big on Saturday, can you let the people know what the actual plans are?
Yep, sure. So so we're meeting at 2 o'clock on Saturday before the West Ham game. So the kickoff is at 3 o'clock. So we're meeting at 2 o'clock outside the Corner Pin pub, which is right by the stadium, also close to the number 8 pub. 2 o'clock. To meet and just to make our voices heard, sing some songs, bring some chants and banners out and things like that. Just to reassure everyone that these are family-friendly protests, and anyone that's attended will attest to. We've had children and families there. They're not violent protests or anything like that. They're not age inappropriate. Everyone is welcome to them. And then we're going to sing some songs with some banners outside the ground at between 2 and 2:30, and then head into the concourse as well to continue that inside the stadium. We've always considered the option of sort of, a lot of people have asked about walkouts and things like that, which is something we'd love to do, but until we are until we have confirmation that we have huge support in terms of numbers. I think the problem is with, say for example, the South Stand has got 15,000 people in it or whatever. If you get 500 people to walk out, it's not going to be noticeable at all. So you need serious numbers to be able to pull off that kind of thing. So that's why we're sort of meeting outside the stadium and going to continue that inside the stadium too. We would love to do things like walkouts in the future, but at the moment we're just on about sending a message to the board. And so far we've had actually probably our most media coverage ever for this protest. It's been in all the national newspapers so far, and Henry Winter's been talking about it and things. So we hope that the club are going to get the message that the fans just need, we need them to be ambitious. We need them to actually address this crisis that we're in.
I don't think you need a protest to engineer a walkout in these days.
I know.
The team does it themselves, I think.
I know.
Yeah. But look, I'll be there on Saturday,
Brilliant.
so very much looking forward to it. So I'll see you on Saturday. And I just want to thank you and the rest of the Change for Tottenham team for all the hard work that you've been putting in over the last couple of years. It definitely hasn't gone unnoticed with a large section of the fan base. So yeah, I implore you all to go and get down there 2:00. Even if you're not going to the game, this is big for the future of our football club. So everyone wants a better Tottenham Hotspur. So get down to the corner pin or on the corner of the South Stand 2:00 on Saturday. But Billy, thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
No, thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate your support over the years, and look forward to see you on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely, mate.
Nice one, Billy.
Definitely, mate. And that is Billy T from Change for Tottenham. The unbelievable work that goes into that is just crazy. So thank you very much, Billy, for coming on today.